thank you so much for being great ambassadors for our product. A lot of what we do is because of leaders and ambassadors like you. Thanks a lot. Before you guys sit down, first-timers, turn around, look, because these are the guys who can hook you up with where you can hang out for the next 4 days. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So in 30 seconds, what we're going to do in this session is, the problem statement is we're going to help our customers change their Salesforce One experience with either components that we are going to expose, or with components our partners are going to build, or components that you guys would build for your specific business needs. I'll show you a demo of the app builder, which is the future vision of how you can change your experience. And in the process, I'm going to talk about how we build our components. So during the demo, I'll talk about some best practices, how we build our components, and how that relates to what you want to do. So that's what we're going to do. Am I loud enough? Is this good? Awesome, thanks. Am I too loud? I've got a full panel here. I've got Jason, Jesse, and Michael. They would be part of the Q&A. I've got extended Q&A down there. So any questions you have, we should be able to get to. I'm also going to have Skip, who is the gentleman who does a lot of the lightning and exposing the component. He's the product manager for that. He's going to join us later. So if you have any questions regarding lightning components and how they get exposed and how our partners build and what's the roadmap for that, he should be able to answer that. All right. Before I go any further, safe harbor. We are a publicly traded company. In this session, we will be showing future features and current features. Any buying decisions you make, please make it on currently available features. Future features, we intend to build them, but any buying decisions, please make it on current features. Are there any business leaders or IT leaders here who make buying decisions? Thank you. All right, I'll jump into the demo. All right, so what I have here is an emulator, a standard Salesforce One out-of-the-box emulator that a lot of you guys would have seen. Nothing special, nothing different from what you have seen. On the background, I'm going to show you the Lightning App Builder. How many of you guys have had a chance to check out the Lightning App Builder since this morning? Okay, so it's new for a lot of you guys. Awesome. Going to quickly build two things. I don't like the way my view is, so I'm going to build my recent views one. What you see on the left side is components that we have built and components that our partners have built. This is something which our partners have built in the last month and a half, 2 months. So this is still pilot. It's still being worked through, but this is our vision. Our vision is you would have components that Salesforce builds, you would have components that our partners build, and you'll have components that you would build available in the same pane, and you would be able to drag and drop and build your new Salesforce One experience. When I say new Salesforce One experience, what I mean is if you just are going to override a field, if you're going to add a widget, or you're going to change the way the left panel works, or the left navigation panel works. So all of that is possible. I'm going to give you a quick example on what I mean. I don't like the way my recent items work right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that. Okay. So my recent items, let's add one to it. I'm going to add, I've got an account in there. I'm going to add a contact. I'm going to add an opportunity and quickly say OK. And I'm going to save that. I'm going to create another page. I'm going to call that my territory. One again. And what I'm trying to do here is, I've heard a lot of customers talk about this, which is I have a territory which is a geographical area. I'm visiting my territory, I see a new company or a new account. I want to know if that account already exists in the system, and if it does, how can I find it? So the way we're trying to solve that problem is, one of our partners has a GeoNav which they've built. It's right here. I'm not going to do with the data and the central location. What the data URL does is it loads the accounts that are there, and then it's a JSON at this point, and then the central location is basically centering around a certain area. I'm not going to do that right now. And I'm going to add a filter list, which is one of our components. And all I'm going to say is my accounts. I'm doing this on a demo org, something which is available now, but in a couple of releases you should have this available for all the orgs, or if you sign in. The goal is, if you build your own, the components that you see on the left side would be available. If you build your own components, it will be available on your org or orgs. The quick, easy way to activate this is let's do my territory. Note to self, next time I think I should, the screen becomes smaller when I do it this way. So I'm sorry about that. All right, and I'm going to, at this point, nothing has changed. Do a refresh. All right. So what we just built, I could see it here, and this is my recent items. I've got an opportunity, an account, and a contact. If I go to a new account, my recent items would change. And same with territory. So the public interface for our components is two things. One is attributes, and the other is events. An example of attributes here is, I don't like that I only see one of the latest item. I want to see, let's say, 3 or 4 of the latest item. Then I should be able to set it as an attribute. And where I should set it up is on the builder. I should be able to see it on the left nav, and I should be able to set my attribute. So that's one of the reasons why it's pilot at this point. If we are able to set up an attribute here, that's one step closer to being GA. A lot of the way our components work is through events. So there are two kinds of events, general app level event. So the refresh that you saw is a general app level event. When you do a refresh, it refreshes every component that subscribes to it. So it's a general publish subscribe model. Or any page up, page down that you do on a component, or when components talk to another component, all those are events. So for example, in the territory example that I gave you earlier, if I have a map, I'm driving down, I see a new account. If I expand the map, I should have the new list of accounts in my filter list. Once we are able to hook this up, that's our vision. And the way our components are built right now, it will completely support that vision. And that's because the contract that our components have is events and attributes. The general construct through which Salesforce 1 is built is you have a left nav, which is this, central space, central panel, and then you have notifications, and then you have actions, which or pop-ups or messages, which would come up from the bottom. So as long as when we build our components, we try to build our components for one of these patterns. As long as our ISVs, or as long as you build your components adhering to one of these patterns, it should seamlessly work inside Salesforce 1. That's our goal. So I showed you how you can change the Salesforce 1 experience. One of the other things that one of our partners have done is they have also changed, they've had a plugin which would overwrite a field. If you notice the probability field there's a little widget which comes up. Or if you notice, there's a political map which is shown for this opportunity, or a snapshot that comes up. All these are extensions or plugins that were built by our partners in the last 6 weeks. So to come back, our components are basically a functional unit. Everything is a component for us, whether that's a button, or that's a lookup, or that's a field, or a list. Everything is a component. We reuse a lot of our components, and we use theming actively. For example, if I take this, if I take accounts, this is a list. If I go to my feed, this is again a list. The only difference is the templating that's associated to these lists are different. So this is all our components basically have theming and the component functionality separate, and that's how we reuse the same components in different parts of the app. I'll give you another easier example. This is a menu. And so is this. Both have, the basic component is the same, but the templating is different. That's the only difference. The components we built support a lot of browsers, almost all the browsers that are available today. A done criteria for us is if a component goes through a UI UX review, the code is designed and code reviewed. There's accessibility testing that's on our components. Almost all our components pass accessibility. All of them go through a performance testing. There's cross-browser and device testing. And then we have offline, which I can talk about after this. Most of the cross-browser testing is automated. Some of it is manual, but most of it is automated either as unit testing or end-to-end integration testing. I have two things I want to share with you. One is regarding accessibility, and that's around menu. It's a very good use case, and it also brings out some of the challenges that we faced around making menu accessible. Jesse could talk about that. Yeah.
Okay. Who here is familiar with accessibility? Anybody know what that is? All right, so for those of you who are not familiar with accessibility, essentially accessibility makes sure that people who have disabilities can use your application or your product. One of the clearest giveaways that you are dealing with an inaccessible application, it can be seen in the menus. So we knew that was really important for us. If you think about in software applications, say just the browser, or if you use Outlook still perhaps, that file, edit, view, etc. menu, who's ever navigated those using a keyboard? Maybe Alt-F to open the file, or once they get up there, they arrow down. Alt-F-Q is a quick way to get out, things like that. Who of the people who've done that, how many times have you tried to use an arrow key or use your keyboard to use a menu in a web-based application and had difficulty there? Maybe a few. And so that's pretty common. So what we wanted to make sure is that when we built these components, especially for Salesforce 1, even if we knew it was mostly, at least initially, going to be viewed on a mobile device, we wanted to make sure that these components were completely accessible. So what we did was we used the WCAG specifications and the ARIA specifications, which are two of the international standards for accessibility as put out by the World Wide Web Consortium. And we built that into that component. And some of the difficulties that you actually kind of wanted me to allude to were making them in such a way that when people kind of extend these components and make them their own, ensuring that a lot of that accessibility that we built in remains there. When you have a framework that is so componentized, you can take any piece you want. And what we found is a lot of times people took only some of them. I'm going to take the list, but I'm not going to take the button or the trigger. I'm going to take the trigger, but I'm not going to make the list. Or I want my list to look different. And so that was a big evolution that we went through, and we really found a good way to keep that together, mostly through quality testing. That really helped us out there. Anything else you'd like me to add about our menus? No. Any questions that anybody has about accessibility or accessible components?
We can do Q. Okay. The two other things that I want to bring out is offline and some of the things that we do for performance. So the general offline use case I've heard is where customers have a protocol or they go off the grid. They should be able to save the micro movements or the bigger movements, and they should be able to access it later. What we have done is we have made each of our components offline supported. So even we've taken off the server dependency for our components so that when you build by taking different components, as long as you're able to cache the record, your component would support your offline use case. So that's how we have solved that problem. It's not GA at this point, but in the next 1 or 2 releases, you should be able to see that. Some of the other things we do for performance is we bash our calls. We do, wherever possible, app-level caching. So the newer phones support app-level caching. When a newer phone is identified, we do app-level caching. Some of the rendering we do on the server side, and we do on-demand JavaScript rendering or more on the client side. When we are adding data, we append. We don't create. So these are some of the things we do to increase our performance on our components. I'm going to do a time check. We've got another 15 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it open to Q&A. But before that, we built our components to support a mobile phone. And then now we're supporting a tablet. I can't predict how our UI is going to change. I mean, we could have a bigger screen. We could have something like Minority Report, where 3 or 4 people are working accounts and adding contacts and pulling opportunities. But I believe if we go to a UI like that, or if we go to a wearable UI, I believe the way we are building our components should be able to support those those form factors. So with this, I'm going to throw it open to questions. But before, I'm going to invite Skip over. He should be able to answer a lot of the questions on the Lightning app builder and how components are exposed.
And if you have questions, we do have some mics in the room here as well, so that everybody can hear.
Maybe it was implicit in your description, but are the components authored completely in JavaScript, or are there some Apex part to them? How is one of the components you showed, what sort of files make up its implementation?
So I'll take that. There's actually a number of files that make up a Lightning component bundle. So you have a markup file, which is a component file itself that's largely XML or XHTML markup. Then there's several JavaScript files that include a controller, a helper, and a renderer. And then you can have a style file, which is a .css file. And then you can have a doc file, a .rdoc file. Now those make up the client-side component that's delivered to the client piece. There's also the Apex controller. So inside of your component, you can say you utilize a particular controller and make calls out to that via a Lightning action. And there you're going to call actually an Apex class, call a method on that class that's marked as @Aura enabled. That's an annotation for it. Makes it available to Aura. And what we do is we actually will make the calls to the server, and as Srinivas mentioned, we do some box carring of all the requests that come in within a certain time period so that you're not making multiple requests being very chatty. And then we return that back down basically as a JSON representation. So what you're dealing with on the client side is the JSON version of what you see on the Apex side, but it's all Apex server side. Does that answer your question?
So you put all this work into the mobile side, and that's very exciting. But is there going to be any support soon for having this on the desktop side?
So not in the current desktop, but hint, hint, there's future UIs that will be Lightning component based. And most, if not all, of the current Salesforce UIs that are being built are Lightning component based. So if you've seen some other sessions, they talk about some of the futures, that's where we're going there. But we don't currently have plans to enable a Aura tab in the classic, or a Lightning component tab, excuse me, in the classic desktop UI. And there are several reasons around that. It's not saying it couldn't be done technically, but it's not planned to be done.
But like if you think about what the Lightning builder was built using Lightning, or is being built using Lightning. So that demo you saw, that the tool that Srinivas used to build that app, that desktop application, that is being built using Lightning components.
And although the focus was on the mobile experience using the Lightning components, that doesn't mean that the components aren't usable on the desktop. And kind of as you kind of saw on the browser compatibility tab, the components are already being tested across all the major desktop browsers, including some of the minor desktop browsers as well. And I believe in the current release, there are actually desktop places where Lightning components are being used instead of as part of the Aloha UI.
So does that mean that if we wanted to, we could attempt to try to use Lightning components in traditional Visualforce pages, or only, or is that completely cut away from us for the time being?
Again, we don't have any plans right now to let you use an R component or Lightning component directly inside of a Visualforce page or in the classic, the Aloha user interface. That's our safe harbor statement. That's about the best I can say at this point.
Right, thank you.
Hi, Skip. Can you speak to the issues with Canvas and Lightning? Because we've seen I guess when you enable Lightning, it warns you about Canvas. Can you clarify that?
Sure. So the question's around, if you go to the quick starts and other sessions where you enable Lightning components and you see a warning message saying, warning, this will disable Canvas. And the reason is around a security restriction for basically same domains. You'll notice if you run a one.app or other R apps, it'll change the URL to be lightning.force.com instead of salesforce.com. We're required to run outside of the Salesforce domain for security purposes, much in the way that Visualforce does as well. So whenever you see that URL change, that's so we can allow for these components to have access without getting full access to the salesforce.com domain. The Canvas applications were written without that anticipation, and when they're suddenly have the URL changed on them, they lose the connection, and they lose, importantly, the connection back via a SID for doing REST calls and so forth back into the server side. We'll be addressing that most likely in the Spring 15 release, if not in the patch before then. But it's a bigger issue than it sounds like, because it's not just simply a matter of changing a URL for the iframe that Canvas runs in. It's actually at a different level there. But it's something we will make sure it's a short-term type issue.
When you spoke about offline, just trying to get an idea more about caching. I mean, most developers working with the mobile SDK just use NoSQL and use the back-end security on its own. In Salesforce 1 last year, we were all wondering, would that functionality be available out of the box with Salesforce 1? Is Lightning getting closer to that, or is it still something that's being thought about?
So is the question that how soon is the offline support available?
Well, no, it's more the nature of the offline. We're talking more about caching. It sounds more like you have to have downloaded the record to your phone before you can go offline. Whereas the mobile SDK, you can go off and get it and store it locally.
Oh, sure, I get you. So you're thinking of pre-caching for you. I don't believe right now there's any pre-caching, but they're working on that. And this is different from just the mobile SDK. It would utilize some of that technology, but the team building what's called the Smart Cache is aware of that, and the idea is to anticipate things you might want to have and make available to you. But right now I'm pretty sure there's nothing that's pre-caching like that. And this is not a case where the offline is going to load, lots of records. In fact, in the older touch UIs and so forth, there was the ability to basically download lots of stuff, lots of your records. And what they found is that very few people actually use that. In fact, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have your entire Salesforce experience replicated on the mobile device. It's not practical. It's not as well used. But offline will be a way that you can cache things at a more selective level and still do some of the same things, but in a way that will work and scale better.
So from a development, management, and operations perspective, as a team who's just getting familiar with this, what would you suggest we do to start learning? What are the tools that are available to us? How does our way of working change going from a Apex, Visualforce, Force IDE, Maven's Mate kind of world into this world?
So again, when you look at the safe harbor statements, we can't recommend that you use anything that's in beta to make your decisions right now. Our hope is that in the next release or two, we'll be in the GA form, and we'll have it fully available. You'll be able to build things and put them on App Exchange, share them, etc. But you can't make your decisions based upon beta or other forward-looking type things. That being said, personally, I would encourage you to take a look at it. It is the way we're building all of our new UIs. It's very significant. And it has advantages because it's made for components. It's a very strong component model. It's made for you to build things and share them and interoperate. It's made to be tooled from the start. So there's a lot of things we've done to enable these features that'll be really good for Salesforce customers down the road. But today, it's hard for me to say, go do it without, looking at your particular time frames and timelines and your own requirements.
I think the question was where.
Would you mind elaborating a little bit more?
Could you speak up,
Could you-
please? We can't
Sure,
really hear you.
sure. Is that better? Can you hear me now?
A little bit.
Yeah, better.
Okay. Would you mind elaborating a little bit more about the tools, measurements, and benchmarks that you guys use in regarding the accessibility performance testing that you guys do? Are those available?
Tools or
I didn't understand. I didn't hear what the question.
So basically, you're asking like what kind of tools we have for benchmarking for performance.
What tools, what tools, what measurements you use to ensure that your components are meeting the performance and accessibility benchmarks that you're setting?
That's a great question. All right,
Thanks.
so a lot of the tools that we actually use are homegrown. For example, talking about accessibility, there's an echo. Talking about accessibility, we actually have a JavaScript accessibility test that goes through a lot of the WCAG rules and makes sure, for example, that all anchors have text, all buttons have some sort of text as well, whether it's hidden or not. Some of the performance metrics that we do, we have an in-house tool that we actually use to see how long it takes a component to load, rendering, script, all that good stuff. And then we make sure that either we stay at that mark or it's just a little bit more. Otherwise, you guys are using the components. If they go too slow, you won't want to use them. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was asking. Are any of those tools potentially going to be made available to ISVs or developers in general?
Yeah, it's like I paid you to come here. It's amazing.
Didn't I get the check from you?
We can handle it later. So the accessibility tool is actually within the Aura.
Open source, yeah.
It's within open source Aura. Internally, we go through everyone who writes internally, anybody who writes an Aura, who writes a component, Lightning component. Sorry. It ends up being opted into all accessibility tests, and we have performance metrics that go through everything, make sure that, hey, this is running slower, or hey, this is running faster, actually. Good job, guys. You get like gold star.
Yeah.
So currently it's internal.
Through the open source, you can download the accessibility testing or not?
Through open source, it is with open source, yeah.
Yeah, so like, was it force.com/Aura? Inside that bundle is the accessibility tests. I don't think they work on, I don't know if they work on the platform or not though.
I don't believe they're currently exposed to the platform yet.
Yeah.
Once again, the platform it's beta.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So anything is due to change.
something which we have on our roadmap, but that's way down, 2-3 releases. At least 2-3 releases away. He can answer. Cinnamon has. One of our other initiators has that on their roadmap, but it's at least 2-3 releases down.
So it really pains me to ask this, but I noticed for the controllers that we had to expose for the JavaScript for the Lightning needs a special annotation. Will that be available for a professional edition?
So is the question, will Lightning components run on Professional Edition?
Yeah.
So right now there is a requirement that you have a namespace in order to build Lightning components, hence the DE restriction, the Developer Edition restriction. That'll be removed in the next release. It's not actually a limitation, it's just the fact that we didn't get enough done in the last release. So right now you have to create a namespace, and you can only do that in a DE org. You can, however, deploy your Lightning components into other orgs, and the only real requirement right now is that they be able to run Apex. So if you have Apex on an org, you can use the Lightning component-based bundles on there.
Well, you say deploy, but actually that has caught us a few times because we've deployed packages with record types and or web services, and that blocks us from installing on Professional Edition. That's what I'm worried about.
I don't really know if I know the answer for that, but the answer is this is just a standard package. You build it in the same way you build other packages. So if you can deploy other packages into your org, you should be able to do so. The Lightning itself is treated just as another resource inside of Salesforce.
All right. Well, thanks.
Can take one more question, if there's any. All right. Thank you.
Just a quick one.
Oh, sorry.
The left-hand side of the app builder, you've got room for about 10 components on the left-hand side that other people have done. Is that going to be expanded? Can we sell components, and will that be another part of the app exchange, or is that where you're thinking of going?
I didn't talk about the component exchange.
So right now we've exposed a fairly small set of components. That will be broadened. In fact, we've got several hundred components that are being reviewed right now for exposure out for use by our customers. And these range from fine-grained components up to very large components that do a lot of cool things. That's in the future, if you will. Hopefully not that far in the future. As far as being able to sell components, the answer is yes. You can actually package and deploy these or upload them to AppExchange. Someone else can install them. Now, it's still new enough that the process of getting a component approved for it has not been fully vetted, but that's part of the beta is going to be testing that out. So right now you can't buy stuff that's in beta off AppExchange anyway. It's all beta for install, but that will be done by GA, so you'll have a full component marketplace for you to upload, install, buy, sell, etc. Again, this is built for Force.com. It's even though we started with an open source framework, the RF framework, everything we've done for Lightning components is for Force.com support. So it fully supports everything you'd expect.
Internally, we are going through the process of exposing components. All the teams are going through it. We're looking at either the next 2 releases, you should have a larger set of components available. That's the goal. All right, thanks for, I'm going to wrap up with that. Thanks for